Sirio spoke yesterday, and it was long. Nick talks a good amount, and sometimes the really good nuggets are hidden in the middle of a really long sentence. So I've taken the very best moments from yesterday, where a lot of you have noted, as did I, that Nick was a little bit chippy. I feel like the whole draft process, and as many people call it, silly season, maybe have gotten to him for good and understandable reasons for any GM. There is one little nugget that I missed yesterday that I'm going to play third or fourth in here, where I think it might even shed a little bit more light on exactly what was going on. But first, thank you to Wes, longtime fan, complimenting the thumbnail. Arturo, appreciate you always being here. It's awesome. I love taking away from your guys' work productivity on a Friday. Bastards, stick it to the man. Damn it. Just stick it to him. Thank you, Mary. Hello, Rick. Here we go. So, first, a little treat for you. I did a 1-minute montage of Nick's surliest moments from the press conference. These were chef's kiss. Here you go, Nick. 1 minute of Nick at his best.
I'm sure we'll get some questions here about the offseason and some of the things that we've done. I mean, frankly, it's kind of laughable. I mean, it's so early. I mean, we haven't done anything. Yeah, I think anything that's said outside the building is just noise. Draft grades, right? I mean, it's the most ridiculous concept that I've ever heard of. Like, we can talk about all we want about what's going on, what the expectation is. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter. We're not for everybody. Everybody's not for us, and that's okay. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really know what that means. I mean, what, Devin Singletary, was that not like a big enough name last year, I guess? Yeah, number one, I don't even know what that definition means. So if someone can define that for me. Excited to have stuff here, and, when he gets here, I mean, certainly he's, he'll be available, there'll be ample time for you all to visit with him. So, like, we're not, sign a free agent, bring a jersey up here and, like, do a big powwow. Like, that's not how we operate. Like, we don't believe in that.
Is there another way that we're supposed to do it?
No, I'm asking. We're not trying to be difficult. I know that's what everybody thinks.
That's so awesome. Okay, so Nick was feisty, but not like in a way that it never felt like he was being a jerk or anything. Just feels like he's been through enough of these pre-draft moments where he sees all the misreporting that there was last year, all of the speculation that came basically because they just didn't feed any information to the little nugget hussies out there that are trying to get their little nuggets onto their blogs. And people didn't like that. So they made up stories like, oh, they're not going to draft a quarterback and what have you. So he's a little bit sick of it. But there's a little bit more to it that I didn't really pick up on until yesterday. He started off with his opening comments, and I thought these aren't all Nick being surly. I added all those surly moments in there. I got the original sound bites that we'll explain. But Nick just starting off acknowledging his propensity for trades.
Certainly excited about the opportunity we have in front of us next week. We have 9 picks as of Thursday night. We'll see if that changes or stays static, but just given our history, it'll probably change at some point.
Okay, so last year, 8 trades in the draft. The year before, 4 trades. The year before that, 2 trades. So we went from 2 trades to 4 trades to 8 trades. I don't think we need to be math geniuses to know that there's going to be 16 trades in this draft. It's going to be crazy. I do think that I don't expect those 2 first-round picks to stick. I think at least one of them gets moved. I think if I had to put money on it, I would very much bet that at least one of those second-round picks is going to get moved, which should be fun. It was a record number of picks traded last year for the Texans. Oh, this is what I didn't know. Since Caserio joined the organization in 2021, the majority of Texans draft picks originally belonged to other teams. So that's how active it is. It's impossible to keep track of these damn things. So that part I look forward to. Next question, or next of his opening comments, was he was talking about players visiting the building for these top 30 visits. And this is where I realized, okay, some of this pre-draft misreporting, it could have an actual effect on the way the team operates, because it can lead to questions. Here's Nick on the top 30 visits.
Finished up some of the draft visits in terms of the players in the building. Had a number of players in the building. Had some players in the building that we really didn't have in the building. But, I mean, I think that's the way it goes this time of year. There's a lot of information that's floating around.
Right. Okay. So it's top 30 visits, which he goes into later. It's kind of a misnomer because it's not your top 30 guys, but you're only allowed 30 of these visits. In the way he phrased it there, it sounds like some of the people who've been reported to have visited the Texans, maybe didn't actually visit the Texans. That would piss me off if I were GM, because that's when the NFL might look and say, well wait a second, what the hell? Like, this is 32. Now we got to find out if this guy actually. So that part might actually affect my day-to-day business as a GM, aside from just ignoring the media reports and everything. So I get that. Maybe that was a little bit of it, even though he didn't look surly in that moment. He quotes Will Anderson, which is a nice piece talking about the Texans not being for everyone.
Will said it best the other day in terms of our program, what it's about. We're not for everybody. Everybody's not for us, and that's okay.
That I like that. Just now that Will Anderson has said it and Nick said it a couple times yesterday, I love the "we're not for everybody" because it just takes a phrase that's typically a little bit of an insult. He's not for everybody, and turns it into a compliment. And I don't think anybody has ever said that about D'Amico Ryans or anything. I think that goes back to Will Anderson talking about how at the Pro Bowl, just because you express interest in us, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily the right fit for the Texans. We do things a certain way. We do it the Will Anderson, C.J. Stroud, D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio way. Has it yielded huge results yet? No, but we do it this way. Damn it. Next, what do you think of all the pre-draft? What do you think of all the pre-draft chatter? You guys know where this is going.
I'm sure we'll get some questions here about the offseason and some of the things that we've done. I mean, frankly, it's kind of laughable. I mean, it's so early. I mean, we haven't done anything. So what happened last year has no bearing on this year. So we're focused on right now. We're focused on the present. We're focused on improvement.
Yeah, that was still his pre-draft comments. So the one thing about this is I could totally 100% see Nick at this point, when he does pay attention to any of the pre-draft chatter, like, they haven't accomplished anything yet, right? Like the last big playoff game they were in was really disappointing, and there were a lot of positive changes and a lot of good results, and they're headed in the right direction. But man, anybody that's been in the NFL as long as Nick has gets really, really nervous when you start talking about winning the offseason, because you just see it time and time again. I think Sean Pendergast, local Shock Jock morning radio host, this morning made a good point when he said that, I think if Nick were to maybe beat his chest about anything, which he's not one to do, it's that they were aggressive in the offseason and they did, win the offseason, but they did it without just spending exorbitantly and over the top. The Patriots a few years ago, when they won the offseason, they just spent boatloads more than everybody else in the league. And they did long-term contracts. Like Nick did this in aggressive but short spurts with guys on shorter term contracts. So that's why I'm a little bit more comfortable than I would be if people were heaping all this praise on winning the offseason, because none of these contracts are ones that, if they don't work out, are going to hamstring the team. If they don't, none of these are going to capsize the team or the cap, or have diminish your chances of signing Nico Collins or CJ Stroud in a couple years. So that part, I feel very, very good about. This is about his philosophy of team building going into the draft.
When you go into the draft as best you can, you want to put the team in a position where if you had to go out there and play a game today, like we'd be able to put a team on a field. So, and we feel as we sit here today, if we had to go out there and play a game, we'd be able to put a team out there and not necessarily have to rely on the draft to, let's say, add a player. Like, I think whoever we draft, I mean, hopefully they'll come in here and create a role and a niche for themselves. It's probably going to be hard to make this team or make a significant impact.
I do like that. I like that part. It's going to be hard to make this team. I like it for two reasons. One, because I think it's true, considering how much the roster has improved and that there's depth this year, more so than we've had in a long time. But I think also it suggests that perhaps Nick isn't tied to his draft picks. You're not. The last thing you want is a team where every draft pick makes the team every year, because then there's not actually a lot of competition going on. So you got to trust your process and trust your picks. But if you keep those draft picks around for any more than 1 year, last year's draft picks and the year before that, those guys shouldn't get any special treatment. They're either going to make it, they're either good enough, or they're not. So that part I like a lot. Also, today, brought to you by Ownwell. If you hate paying your property taxes, but especially if you hate them because they're too damn high, and frankly, you think they're unfair and unjust, I have protested my property taxes before. It did not go well. I wish I had used Ownwell. Go to ownwell.com/Houston. It's down in the comments. And 86% of the people who sign up with Ownwell, it only takes 3 minutes to sign up. They save money on their property taxes. So do this. Do this as a gift to yourself so you don't get surly about paying your property taxes and start taking it out on other people, the villagers and whatnot. Ownwell.com/Houston. Next question. His feelings about the things they've done in the offseason.
I think anything that's said outside the building is just noise, so it doesn't really affect our focus, our preparation. So, like, we're just focused on our team, we're just focused on improvement, and we're focused on the work. So, it's kind of like the draft, or we go through the weekend. We're gonna have on Monday, right, or Sunday afternoon, draft grades, right? I mean, it's the most ridiculous concept that I've ever heard of. Like, the players haven't even been in the building yet, and we're making an assessment about their performance. It's the same thing in the off season. I mean, nothing is won in the off season. It's all on paper. It's all chatter. Honestly, it's, fun for you guys, I'm sure, to talk about. But our focus is in the building on the things that we can control, which is the work and just continual improvement.
This is one thing about Caserio and the draft grades is that largely, I think, the first year he didn't get good draft grades. You know why? He didn't have a first round pick. And that's so much of the draft grades goes into three things. One is the most substantive part is people will look at the roster and say, okay, it's either they needed this, but they didn't get it, or they needed this position and they got it. So they'll that makes some sense. But then a lot of it after that just comes down to name recognition and whether the kid went to a big school. Like if he has name recognition and went to a big school, people will resoundingly say, yes, I know that name. If they are from a Power 5 conference, especially when you get into the later conferences, there'll be people that maybe you saw in a national championship game or in a league championship game or what have you. So that's where it's so bogus. And like Nick said, it takes 3 years to grade a draft, but we can't help ourselves, Nick. This is where I've flipped the most from when I was a player until now, because I know intellectually how stupid draft grades are. You get so tired of playing against rookies that they draft a rookie center or guard who's supposed to be the next greatest thing, and he's tough. Did you know how tough this guy was? And then you realize this kid's a squid. This kid sucks. So you just you lose they lose their luster. But it's now that I'm a media scumbag, they're fun to talk about. I don't do them myself. I can't take that kind of scrutiny and heat. His philosophy, we talked about the philosophy of the team building. On if he feels like this free agency helped them be able to secure some of the bigger names. He gets a little chippy here.
In what ways do you feel like this free agency you all were able to kind of secure some of the bigger names that you all have had in the past?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't really know what that means. I think, when you put the team together, you look at the opportunities that are presented in front of you. You have X number of dollars that you have available to you, and it's all about resource allocation. So, I mean, you could Devin Singletary, was that not a big enough name last year, I guess?
I don't. It wasn't that big a name. Look, Joe Mixon wasn't strictly a free agent. Obviously, that was a trade, but we kind of lump him into the free agency deal. I feel like Joe Mixon, in his willingness to come here, because whenever you trade for a vet, you want to be sure that the guy actually wants to come here. I think he was probably way more willing to come than he would have been last year. And certainly maybe he wouldn't have signed an extension if he had come last year. So there's that. I think Danielle Hunter blows away. And no offense to Devin Singletary. That was an awesome signing. But Devin Singletary went off and, got a better deal this year because of what he did with the Texans. So I disagree with Nick there. I appreciate that he's showing respect to Devin Singletary, but yeah, I think it was a step up this year. There was a clarification here, and I think this was I don't know if it was Jonathan Alexander or DJ Bieneme who asked the question, but he clarified a little bit what he was talking about.
Said that a lot of players at the Pro Bowl were like, "Hey, tell Miko, tell the Texans to come get us." To me, that indicates that a lot of people were interested. So I was just wondering if you saw a lot more interest from free agents, or in what ways did you see that was different than years past?
It starts with the people that are in that locker room down the hall, the players that are here, a lot of the returning players, and then honestly, it starts with the head coach. So, I mean, arguably, look, I'm biased, but like he's one of the best coaches in the league. Ultimately, the most important thing that the player has to do, and it's D'Amico's message to the team anytime we get together, we don't have a lot of rules, but ultimately protect the team is the most important thing. Just because a player is interested in us doesn't necessarily mean we're interested in that player. So does he have the right fit? Do we foresee a role for him? Does he fit the system? Again, like Will said, we're not for everybody. Everybody's not for us. And there's a number of different ways you can view that.
I really like that. It feels like Will and Nick and probably others are taking that on almost as like, as a point of pride that, hey, we're an exclusive club. You can't be in our club unless you meet the criteria. It's not as simple as just, oh yeah, well, you're a marquee free agent, we're going to throw you a boatload of money. This is where, in some respects, it's free agency in the NFL is a little bit like recruiting in college, where you can go out and amass a boatload of 5-star recruits. Texas at various times, University of Texas, not bagging on Texas. They've always been able to pull 5-star recruits, but we've seen at times that it's not as simple as just bagging a bunch of 5-star recruits. You got to get guys that fit your team. And I think that's very much the philosophy with these guys. As far as D'Amico being a draw, or at least, something that maybe puts a little bit more shine on the Texans. Nick concedes that a lot of it just comes down to money one way or the other. But as far as D'Amico being a draw and possibly something that, maybe gives them an edge, I think D'Amico is very much in that category of guys that I know, like Gary Kubiak. Back when I played, it was like Jeff Fisher, Denny Green. These guys were known as dudes that you love to play for. They're just different. They don't stress about the stuff that doesn't really matter. They just want you to protect the team and do what's right. Put a high emphasis on player leadership. That's one thing that Kubiak really talked about when he came in. And D'Amico so far, like there's just zero reason to think that that's going to change. He's the real deal. Next question was on this is Jason Bristol. I'll let Jason Bristol ask the question. This is about Stefan Diggs. Jason Bristol from KHOU.
There is a label, or people say, oh, he's a diva. And the fact that we haven't heard from Stefan yet, is that a Stefan thing, or is that a football ops thing?
Yeah, number one, I don't even know what that definition means. So if someone can define that for me, again, like we're not worried about, we're worried about what a player does when he walks in our building. So we do our research. We talk to our players. We talk to other players all the time. Excited to have Steph here. And, when he gets here, I mean, certainly he'll be available, maybe ample time for you all to visit with him. So, I mean, again, there's not too many people that have been available. We just started the offseason program. So, like, we're not, sign a free agent, bring a jersey up here and, like, do a big powwow. Like, that's not how we operate. Like, we don't believe in that.
We don't do that crap around here. Yeah. See, like, so Jason, he didn't hurt Jason's feelings or anything. Jason asked the question about a diva. I would say the definition of a diva is defined by Oxford. We went over this morning. A self-important person who is temperamental and difficult to please, typically used of a woman. It's always an insult, all right, when it comes to, not that it should be insulting to be compared to a woman, but sometimes when people try to say injurious things to other people, they use tactics like that. Never me. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to say that at times Stefan Diggs has acted like a diva. I have been a huge proponent of bringing back more divas into the wide receiver position. I feel like Andre Johnson and Kelvin Johnson, by being the preeminent receivers for a long stretch of time, but also being like the anti-divas, I feel like they kind of hurled the diva out of favor, and I think it's time to bring them back. And we've made inroads. I feel like Stefan Diggs with a big year with the Texans could be another, like a benevolent diva. That's what I want, a benevolent diva. Next question was on what wide receiver Stefan Diggs brings to the team in terms of versatility. And I believe this was Aaron Wilson asked Nick about Nick throwing to Stefan Diggs at the Maryland Pro Day back in the day when Nick was with the Patriots. So that's you guys can tell I cut some of these answers down to try to get the very best Nick Caserio and not just kind of the word salad Nick Caserio. So he jumps in right in talking about that Pro Day workout.
That information, honestly, is probably more relevant than, what an information might be kind of floated around outside the building. But as it pertains to him, I mean, look, he's an experienced player. He's been productive. He's instinctive. He has good hands. So, our system is maybe a little bit different than the system that he was in Buffalo, but he was as productive as any. So there might be some things that we're doing maybe that are similar to maybe what he was doing in Minnesota.
So that one point there, as far as Minnesota, remember Gary Kubiak was in Minnesota in 2019. I believe Stefanski had some Kubiak Shanahan type influences before that too, but especially after Kubiak was there, when he was there, he's an assistant head coach and an advisor in 2019. Stefanski left and he became the offensive coordinator as Stefan Diggs went to Buffalo. But long story short, he's got familiarity with the scheme and the terminology, everything else like that. So that part, I think I'm A-okay. I don't think there's any kind of, I don't worry about the scheme match with a single one of these guys. Danielle Hunter, for instance, it's going to be really good for Danielle Hunter. He was on a scheme last year where they blitzed a lot, and that can be good for pass rushers too, because you get a lot of single blocks. But it's going to be fun to watch Danielle Hunter with minimal coverage responsibilities, be able to just get after it, pin his ears back, and go. It's going to be a good influence on Will Anderson. This is Cody Stutz asking a very good question about evaluating the readiness of pro prospects, but also Nick gave an answer that kind of surprised me and angered me. It angered me on behalf of some of these athletes that are getting bad advice.
Put together a draft evaluation of a prospect. How much goes into how can the guy help day one versus how can the guy help maybe in November, December versus how can he help in the years to come with that player?
Generally speaking, Cody, a lot of these players are behind just relative to their development, where they are physically. I would say for whatever reason this year, it seems like more players are further behind. And again, some of them have been advised to basically after the combine or their workouts, basically don't do anything physically in lieu of they don't want them to get hurt or anything like that. Well, okay, you lose, call it 4 to 6 months of training, which means when you come in a building in May, you're behind physically. So maybe we think the player is going to be ready physically, but part of our assessment is to see where they are physically, do some testing, get some baseline testing, and we're not going to put the player in a position and kind of force feed it. The player's ready when he's ready.
Right. So this blows me away that there's people advising these players not to work out after they're done with the combine and or the pro days. I don't know where we got to the point where all of a sudden now that every workout has to be, plyometrics and extremely heavy weights or stuff that might damage you, like extreme agility drills or something. Just go out and work out. You should be working out. What the hell? Who the hell is telling these guys not to work out? This destroys. I've seen so many guys come in out of shape and they never catch up. You're in a competition and immediately, you've spent your whole career, your whole athletic life with guidance and coaches telling you when and where to work out. And then all of a sudden, apparently some of these agents are leaving guys on their own and just saying, just don't get injured. So so they're going to go down and not only will they not get injured, but they're going to get deconditioned by just sitting on the couch and playing video games. And I guess you got to that's another part of the evaluation process is you got to figure out, all right, which of these guys is actually, especially remember, they're going to come in for OTAs for a couple months here in minicamp and everything, but then they're going to be left for another month on their own to their own devices and come back fat and sloppy. I'm a grumpy old man. I'm turning into a grumpy old man. Nick, to his credit, stays somewhat dispassionate about stuff like this. He tries to be practical as possible. He's like, all right, well, this is the reality. This is how we're going to have to deal with it. What are you going to do? Last one was this was interesting. I'm glad he gave some clarification on this, on what he's looking for during the top 30 visits and how crucial that process is to whether he selects a player or not.
No, it's interesting. I think the top 30 notion is kind of a little bit of a misnomer. So it's really not the top 30 players. It's really 30 players that you have an opportunity to bring in your building to gain more information on. So we have various checkpoints on players. So the visit may be another checkpoint. Maybe we're trying to find out something specifically. So again, we probably run the gamut of players, where they potentially could get drafted, what their role is. Maybe we're just trying to verify a separate piece of information. And then maybe when they walk out of the building, we say, okay, well, case closed. Like, honestly, we're moving on from the player. That's okay too.
Yeah, that's one of Nick's big things too, is like, that's okay too, which he says, I think that sometimes that's how he reminds himself to just, like, things that we would make judgments about, like kids being told not to work out. Yeah, I think he kind of tells himself, that's okay. That's okay. That's okay. All right. No, we're just gonna deal with what we deal with. But yeah, I think some of these top 30 visits, it's really important to remember that it doesn't mean they're your top 30 choices as a team. It just means these are the 30 guys that you're allowed to bring in, that you've designated. And some of them might be the exact opposite of in your top 30. There's somebody that, like, I just don't know about this kid. He just gave me a bad vibe. Or I just want to find out if he takes responsibility for some of his mistakes, and we haven't had a chance to sit down and watch film. So they might watch film with a guy, and every bad play, he's blaming the guy next to him, and he's talking about how his coach didn't coach him right. And you know how that goes. Sometimes that stuff is true, but you gotta be. Is the kid at least smart enough to know how to present it? Like are you sensing personal responsibility, or is this somebody that's always going to be blaming somebody else? So those were my very favorite moments of this Nick Caserio press conference. Somehow I took it was like a 48 minutes of him talking, and again, there's more in there that I didn't get to. If you don't like paying your property taxes, or you think they're too much, go to ownwell.com/Houston. It's down below. I told you 86% of the people who sign up save money. The average savings is $1,148. Go check them out. They got thousands of happy customers, thousands of 5-star reviews. I'm Seth Payne, played for the Texans long ago. I want to take a couple questions. Yes, David. Excuse my language. Bleep those property taxes. Rick, I saw this. In reality, we don't have any real needs. We're after depth when we're talking about draft strategy. The only place, like, I feel like they've got capable players at almost every spot. I know we're waiting to see exactly what Jalen Petrie is, but there's nobody. I would say the opposite of Derek Stingley with Okudah and Henderson and whomever else. I'm not going to feel super comfortable about that. But I think it sounds and feels like maybe Nick is cool with one of those guys winning the job. Left guard, I just hope it's brutally competitive. I hope that Patterson and maybe a healthy Kenyon Green, maybe a Kendrick Green, is newly enlivened and energized by the change of scenery. Maybe a player to be named later. I hope those guys really battle it out, and you end up with a good quality left guard there. Because if you go into a game like the Ravens game and you don't, and another part of this is Juice Scruggs has to work out at center. If you get center and guard play like we had in that game, it could be really, really brutal and ugly. So that's the big part. And so if they stretch or reach for an offensive guard, I'm not going to be upset about that. They're going to give Scruggs a chance, and I think they should. I'm high on Scruggs. I think he's just naturally not built to be a guard. He's more of he's a center. Some people are just centers. All right. I'm going to see you guys are having a debate about the press conference stuff. Thank you, everybody. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend. Watch us on Sports Radio 610 from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And everybody have an awesome weekend. I'm going to watch Josh Allen and Sean McDermott and what they said about Stefan Diggs, and I'll hopefully put that video out tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.